My name is Elias Trent. I turned 52 the day I found the first note. And by then, I had worked beneath the city morgue for over 2 decades, long enough to stop noticing the smell, long enough to forget what it meant to feel clean. I was not a doctor, not a coroner. I was the man who washed the slabs, who scraped the floors, who scrubbed away what no one else wanted to see. The morgue had no windows, just gas lamps and damp stone walls that kept the cold in year-round. I lived alone in a room 3 floors above, and in all those years, no one ever asked me what I saw down there. Not once. The work was quiet. Too quiet, some would say. But I liked the silence. It meant the bodies couldn't talk back. It meant the past stayed still. Or so I thought. On the morning of February 3rd, 1891, I opened drawer 12B to clean it, and tucked beneath the shoulder of the corpse, a man listed as John Doe, was a folded scrap of paper. I thought it strange, but assumed it had been missed by the constables. I unfolded it. There were only 6 words. He did not drown by accident. I stared at the note until my eyes blurred. Then I checked the man's file. Male, mid-30s, pulled from the Thames. Cause of death, accidental drowning. But his lungs hadn't been examined. That detail chilled me. I'd worked long enough to know when an autopsy was skipped. I'd seen bodies come in and out with paperwork that felt incomplete. But I had never questioned it. Not until that day. I tucked the note in my ledger, the private one I kept for myself, and went back to work. 2 nights later, I found another note. This time, it was pressed beneath the sole of a boy's shoe. Same handwriting, same eerie tone. He was already dead when he fell. Again, I checked the file. A fall from scaffolding, broken ribs, blunt trauma. But I had prepared that body myself. There had been no blood under the skull, no sign of a fall, only bruising around the neck. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, that someone was playing a trick. But who? No one came down here but me. From that night forward, I began to write. Not just names or dates. I wrote what I saw, what I noticed, what didn't make sense. Because something in the dark was starting to speak. And if I didn't listen, if I didn't remember, no one would. No one ever asked what the cleaner saw. But I saw everything, and I think the dead were starting to notice me back. There was one door at the back of the morgue I had never touched. It sat beneath a low archway, rust curling at the hinges, and though I passed it nearly every day, I never once saw it open. Most of the staff assumed it led to the old coal chute, sealed off years ago when the hospital switched to gas. But I always found it odd that the lock was still polished, the dust swept away, as if someone tended it quietly in the dark. One evening, while scrubbing down drawer 4C, I heard it creak. Not loud, not sudden. Just a gentle shift, like someone testing it from the other side. I froze. The lamps along the west wall flickered, once, then steadied. I waited, hands dripping, listening to the slow tick of the clock above the entrance. But there were no footsteps, no voices, only the low hum of gaslight and the whisper of stone cooling in the night. The next morning, I told Mr. Keene. He laughed, short, sharp, without warmth. "Don't go poking your nose where it doesn't belong," he muttered, signing the day's registry. "Some rooms were meant to stay shut." "Was it ever used?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Not anymore." That was all he said, and I didn't ask again. But something in me had shifted. Curiosity, yes, but also a kind of dread, the kind that plants itself in the base of your spine and waits. That night, after the bodies were catalogued and the tools cleaned, I stood alone in the corridor, staring at the door. The air was colder here, still, not with the chill of stone or night air, but something deeper, something watching. I stepped closer. The keyhole was worn, old brass, scratched around the rim as if someone had tried to open it in haste. I reached for the handle, only to pull my hand back. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition. Like my body understood something, my mind refused to admit. The next day, Drawer 7A arrived. A woman, mid-40s, found near the wharf. Cause of death, unknown. Her eyes were still open when I pulled the drawer loose, and as I reached to close them, I found something beneath her wrist. Another note. He saw what wasn't his to see. I stepped back. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. This one hadn't been hidden. It had been placed there. For me. Someone, or something, was leaving them now. I returned to the cleaner's closet, locked the door behind me, and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was my diary, still unmarked, still mine. I turned to the next page, dipped my pen in ink, and began to write. Because the dead don't write letters. But someone down here does. And I was starting to think they weren't dead at all. I had grown used to the cold in the morgue. It clung to the stone, the steel, the bones. But that night, it felt different, like something inside the walls had begun to breathe. The hall was empty. I had just finished recording the day's intake. 5 names, 3 causes of death, marked suspected, 2 marked accidental. I had no reason to stay. But as I passed drawer 3C, the air shifted. It opened. Not quickly, not with force, but slowly, steadily, as though someone inside was pushing from within. I froze, mop in hand, the bucket sloshing quietly beside me. The drawer stopped halfway. I waited. Nothing moved. The body inside was still, a man I hadn't seen before. Thin, balding, a single stitch along the temple. His chart read heart failure, but his expression told a different story. Eyes closed, mouth open, not in pain, but in shock. I stepped closer, uncertain whether I meant to close the drawer or investigate it further. And then I saw it, folded in the hollow of his throat beneath the scarf tied by the attendant. Another note. Stop cleaning what should be remembered. This one was different, not just in tone but in ink. Older. The letters were thick and uneven, as if written by a hand that shook. I backed away slowly and reached for my ledger with the other hand. As I turned, something caught my eye. A shadow, not moving across the floor, but rising from the slab in the far corner. Drawer 8B, empty since last week. Yet now, the gas lamp above it flickered violently, casting long, angular shapes on the ceiling. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Just the sound of the drawer behind me sliding shut. I didn't look back. I fled to my room above the 3rd stairwell, locked the door, and sat in the dark for hours. I did not sleep. Instead, I wrote. Every word. Every breath. Because if I didn't capture it on the page, I feared I would no longer trust what I saw. At dawn, I returned to the morgue. The drawers were closed, the shadows were still, but the scarf on the man's throat was gone. The attendant swore he hadn't touched the body. No one had. That night, I did not stay late. I left the floor clean, the ledgers signed, and my tools in their proper place. But as I reached the top of the stairwell, I looked back. The light above drawer 8B was still on, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt the unmistakable sense that the morgue no longer belonged to the living. I knew I had to go back, not because of duty, not for answers, but because something down there had been trying to speak, and I feared what might happen if I stopped listening. 3 nights passed before I found the courage. I waited until just before midnight, when the corridors above the morgue went quiet and the lamps had been turned low. I carried no tools, only my diary, a single match, and a candle I'd kept from the chapel storeroom. I lit it before descending the stairs, letting the flame guide me. The door at the back, the one no one touched, was open. Just an inch, just enough to say, "I've been expecting you." The air was bitter cold. Not like before. This time it stung the lungs, like breathing frost. I stepped through. Behind the door was a narrow stair, made of stone worn smooth by time and footsteps. Too many footsteps. At the bottom, a chamber I had never seen, or perhaps one I had simply chosen to forget. Wooden slabs, chains on hooks, rotted ledgers stacked on a shelf, each bearing a single word on the spine. Unfiled. I moved toward the nearest slab. On it, a name etched into the wood. E. Trent. I staggered backward. My name. But the slab was empty. Beside it lay a note, older than the others, torn at the corners, edges dark with age. "Don't forget what they buried you with." I didn't understand at first, but then I remembered. My brother. He died when I was 12, fell from the docks. They said it was an accident. But I had always known better. I had heard the struggle, the splash, the silence, and I had never told anyone. My father worked at the morgue back then, before me, before the years and the silence took his mind. He'd kept a journal too, hidden behind the tool rack. I found it once, as a boy. I had forgotten it until now. I opened my own diary, trembling, and flipped back to the first page. A name had appeared there, scrawled in new ink. Benjamin Trent. My brother. I hadn't written it, and yet it was in my handwriting. I don't remember much after that, only that I woke on the floor, candle burned out, with dirt under my fingernails and the faint taste of blood in my mouth. The morgue was dark, silent, and drawer 12B was open again, but this time the slab was empty. I packed that night. I left the keys with Mr. Keene and never returned. I moved 3 towns away and took work as a gardener. Something quiet, something clean, but I kept the diary. You're holding it now. If you found this, it means the morgue never stopped whispering. I do not know who, if anyone, is still listening. But if you ever hear a drawer open without a hand to guide it, walk away. Not everything the dead have to say is meant for the living, and some truths will not stay buried, not even in stone.